At first, everything was banal. Someone lost 100 rubles, then 500. One guy said he lost 1,000, but no one believed him. The teacher pretended that it was all a mistake. "The money will be found, don't worry," she said. But it wasn't. And then I noticed that when someone complained about something missing, the teacher looked not at the student, but at him. Yes, at him. Quiet. Sits at the last desk, always with an empty backpack. Doesn't say hello, doesn't laugh, doesn't even look up. I started following him. I saw him go out during breaks, not to the toilet, but to the teacher's room, through a side corridor that everyone had forgotten. And then, the strangest thing. It was as if he and the teacher were hiding something in a safe, in the school principal's office, where the lock was supposedly broken. I snuck in there at night. In the safe are bundles of money, candy wrappers to disguise them, and a list. Names, amounts. Some crossed out. I told the head teacher about it, and the next day he didn't come to school. Head teacher. Then the girl disappeared, the one who screamed the loudest. They told us that she was transferred to another school, and in her desk there was blood. Real. I found an old camera under the table in the biology room. One of the guards must have forgotten it. The recording shows the teacher giving him the key to the safe, and then a piece of paper with a name. Mine. They knew that I knew. Less than a day left. Today he looked at me, for a long time, smiling. I don't know if I'll finish writing this, but if you found this file, check the safe. It's true. Just don't tell anyone, especially the teachers, and don't sit on the last desk under any circumstances. I made my way into the basement, an old archive, the smell of dampness and dust. Lots of cabinets, locks, stacks of papers. One cabinet was slightly open, as if someone had forgotten to close it in a hurry. I looked inside. There were thick folders with the inscriptions: accounting, reports, purchases, repairs. I opened the first one, stacks of documents and invoices. Everything looked official: signatures, seals, amounts. But when I started comparing, something didn't add up. The school budget was being written off to companies that no one had ever heard of. Dead souls registered to fictitious people. I found fake certificates of work performed, roof repairs, new computers, school meals. But all of this was fictitious. And then came the scariest part. Some of the documents were signed by the teacher and the student who was constantly disappearing. They were filling out these papers on behalf of other employees, and the money that was supposed to go to the school disappeared into their safe. It turned out that they had come up with a whole scheme. First, they collected cash from the students for help with their studies, solving exams, protection from punishment. They put this money in the safe. Then they opened fictitious accounts in the accounting department, writing off funds from the budget. Some of the cash was transferred through front men so as not to leave a trace. And through a third, nicknamed Raven, the money went further, to a secret account from where it could no longer be found. Everyone was connected in a chain. The teacher was the brains of the operation. The student was her right hand and courier. Raven was the mafioso uncle who controlled the rest. And no one at the school suspected, because everyone was talking loudly about a clean and honest school. I even found correspondence where they discussed how to hush up complaints, how to intimidate witnesses. There were many threats, orders to keep your mouth shut and resolve issues quietly. Someone had already tried to leave, but disappeared forever. This whole scheme is not just a theft. It is a dark world inside the school that no one has seen. And now I too have found myself drawn into this game. Either silence or death awaits me. A few days after I found the folders with evidence, the police burst into the school. It all started in the morning. Regular lessons, bells, and then people in uniform and civilian clothes appeared in the corridor. The students were in shock. The teachers tried to remain calm, but fear was visible in their eyes. Investigators and detectives began to work without further ado. They searched the classrooms, confiscated documents, photographed everything. The entire educational process stopped. No one could believe that something like this was happening in their school. I was called into a separate room. There sat an elderly officer with a stern face and cold eyes. He told me that they had learned about fraudulent schemes with the school budget, mysterious disappearances of money, as well as serious crimes, murders, and threats. The police already had my findings in their hands. It was a real bomb. Fake accounts, fake companies, money transfers, threats. They said that this was far from an ordinary school scam, but a whole criminal organization. A few hours later, the teacher and the student who was the ringleader were detained right there. They did not expect such a turn of events. Varan tried to escape, but the operatives quickly found his trail. They found him in an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city, where he tried to hide. The police began interrogating him. At first, silence, threats, but then one of the detainees decided to cooperate. Varan began to talk. He told about the chain, who is responsible for what, how the money's controlled, who covers up the crimes. The investigation became swift and brutal. The police checked every piece of paper, every signature. They started with the accounting department, then brought in experts who uncovered forgeries, CCTV footage, email correspondence. Everything became part of the evidence base. I saw how the school was gradually turning into a place of investigative actions. The doors were sealed, students and teachers were giving testimony, whispering. Everyone was afraid that one of them could be next. The students' parents began to demand the truth. The media also became interested. The school had become the site of a high-profile scandal. Some teachers who had previously turned a blind eye to what was happening now tried to distance themselves, saving their reputation. The scariest thing is how many more secrets the school keeps. How many people are involved? How many more victims? I was scared, but I understood that if I remained silent, it would only get worse. The police promised that they would see the case through to the end. The court, criminal cases, life sentences, they will not leave the criminals unpunished. I saw determination and confidence in their eyes. And although I am scared myself, I no longer feel alone. Now I know that the truth can win if you fight for it. The investigation was difficult, but gradually the police built a chain of evidence. Investigators conducted dozens of interrogations, checked financial documents, looked for connections between the participants in the scheme. It seemed that the long-awaited finale was approaching. All the guilty parties would be caught, the case would go to court, and justice would prevail. But just when the case was almost solved, something unexpected and terrible happened. One evening when the investigators were working late in the school building where the operational headquarters was located, suddenly sharp sounds were heard. Gunshots. The first shot rang out in the corridor, next to the office where the confiscated documents were kept. Suddenly, a man with an M4 assault rifle appeared from around the corner. He moved quickly and mercilessly. Cold-blooded rage burned in his eyes. The police officers who were on the scene tried to organize resistance, but the situation was catastrophic. The attacker was shooting accurately, and a small detachment of armed men, clearly professionals trained in combat, burst in after him. In their hands, they had not only machine guns, but also grenades. Screams, panic, loud shots. The corridors of the school turned into a combat zone. The officers were seriously injured. Some died on the spot. Those who tried to hide hid in offices and behind partitions, listening to the sounds of gunfire with bated breath. It soon became clear this was a well-planned raid. An accomplice whom the police did not even suspect was inside their ranks. The man who had long covered for the teacher, the student, and Voron, now came out into the light with a weapon in his hands to destroy the entire investigation. The attackers took control of the building and headed for the evidence safe. They began to destroy documents and disks with recordings, the most important evidence. In a panic, the investigators tried to stop them, but they were too weak. Hiding in one of the dark rooms, I heard every shot, every dull thud. Fear gripped me, but I understood. If I kept silent now, then everything we learned would be lost forever. A few minutes later, the gunfire died down. The attackers disappeared as quickly as they appeared. It later turned out that they took some of the documents and electronic media. This entire assault was designed to hide the truth. Reinforcements arrived at the scene, inspected the building, and provided assistance to the wounded. The police were shocked, They lost their best fighters, and the investigation was in danger of being disrupted. The public exploded with news of the tragedy at the school. Parents and students were afraid to return to the building, and the police declared a state of high alert. It was now clear that the criminal network was much deeper and more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. There were enemies within the police force, too, who were covering for the criminals and preventing justice from being served. But I wasn't going to give up. I knew the truth had to come out, even if it meant fighting the shadows that lurked in the most unexpected places. After the accomplice opened fire with an M4 assault rifle and killed several police officers, there was a brief but brutal silence. The gunshots died down, and the air was thick with smoke and blood. In the chaos, the criminals quickly realized that they couldn't stay here. Their carefully constructed scheme had been exposed, and now they were being hunted not just by investigators, but by the entire police force in the city. The accomplice, cool and determined, immediately contacted the leaders. There was tension in his voice, but no panic. He knew what had to be done next. The team was ordered to leave immediately. In a rush, they packed all the valuable materials, stacks of forged documents, flash drives with dirt on influential people, large sums of cash obtained through fraudulent schemes. Everything that could help them escape responsibility was now with them. A black SUV with tinted windows was waiting near the school, on a narrow street where strangers rarely stopped. The driver turned on the engine, and the car disappeared into the night, like a shadow dissolving in the darkness. The police, stunned and shocked by what had happened, immediately switched to emergency response mode. Checkpoints were set up in all areas of the city. The interception plan was introduced. Road patrols blocked the main roads, and inspections were increased at the exits from the city. But the criminals were not newbies. They had their own connections, their own levers of influence, bribed airport employees, forged documents and tickets for a private flight, a carefully prepared escape plan. There was a tense silence in the SUV. No one spoke. Everyone understood that life and freedom were at stake. Their eyes, tired and tense, followed the road, waiting for each turn, each traffic jam. Time was running out. An hour later, the car drove up to an abandoned private airfield on the outskirts of the city, a place that the criminals had chosen in advance for an emergency landing. A private plane was already there, small but fast, ready to take off at any moment. The team quickly and silently unloaded everything they needed, boarded the plane. The pilot, also involved in this story, checked the instruments and prepared for takeoff. Meanwhile, the police tried to regroup and gather forces for the pursuit. But the situation was getting more complicated. Reports of suspicious movements were coming into the city, and some cars were passing through checkpoints without being checked. It became clear there were traitors in the ranks of the security forces too. The plane soared into the sky, quickly moving away from the crime scene. The criminals were already thinking about a new place, a country where they had protectors and where the police would not be able to reach them. Dreams of freedom, despite all the obstacles, seemed closer than ever. In the city, the remaining people were in shock. Parents were afraid to let their children go to school. Teachers shared rumors. The media blew up the scandal. The police found themselves in a difficult situation, not only having lost several officers, but also faced with internal betrayal. The protagonist watched all this with alarm. He understood that while the criminals were running, the real fight was just beginning. Justice must catch up with them, even if it meant going through the darkness. He began to gather around him those who were not afraid of the truth. Former students, parents, honest police officers, and journalists. Together they prepared for a long and dangerous fight to restore justice and destroy the criminal network. The plane cut through the night sky and, like an arrow, disappeared over the horizon. They thought they had won. What if now, in a foreign land where they are not known, they start all over again? Where there is no camera under the desk, no school safes, no witnesses who can talk. They chose a country where, as it seemed to them, it would be easy to get lost. A Balkan republic with soft control, corruption, and the opportunity to launder money through fictitious businesses. A new passport, new names, fake biographies. The teacher became a child psychology consultant, Raven, an entrepreneur, and the student, just a shadow in someone else's life. They rented a villa outside the city, equipped everything as a shelter, video surveillance, a supply of weapons, fake documents, crypto wallets, laptops, encrypted servers. They planned to restore the scheme, only now, globally. Online schools, fake grants, digital fraud. The money began to drip again, but they did not take into account the main thing. Even abroad, the shadows of the past do not disappear. Interpol, having received materials from the surviving investigators in their home country, began hunting. Their data was already in the international database, and as soon as one of them showed up, buying a SIM card at the airport, they began to be followed. It was from that moment that their every move was recorded. The police already knew where they lived, where they went, who they were trying to bribe, but they decided to carry out the arrest in such a way that there was no chance of escape. At dawn, 3 black minibuses pulled up to the villa. No sirens, no noise. The special forces in balaclavas jumped out instantly in a coordinated manner. One shot in the air, and it was all over. The teacher was pinned to the floor in the living room. Raven tried to get a gun, but got hit on the wrist with a baton. The student did not even resist. He looked at the floor, as if he was expecting it. The accomplice who shot the police officers was the last to be caught. He was found in an attached storage room with a loaded M4 on his knees. He did not shoot. He just closed his eyes. They were put in jail. First, in solitary confinement. Then, the interrogations began. One by one, they began to talk, to betray each other in order to reduce their sentences. On the investigators' desks lay printouts of diagrams, audio recordings, photos of corpses, accounting, diagrams of school transfers. The trial lasted several months. The scandal thundered around the world. A school that became a lair of a criminal network, a teacher who sent children for processing, a student who controlled internal lists, a security guard, a principal, even an accountant. Everyone was involved. The verdict was unanimous, life imprisonment, without the possibility of amnesty. And me? I sat in the courtroom, in the last row. I looked them in the eyes. They did not recognize me, but I knew who they were. And I knew that the story was just beginning, because those who were higher, those who paid them, who created this network, remained free. But now I knew where to look, and I had names. Only a few days had passed since the verdict. The newspapers were already tired of chewing over this trial. The news feeds moved on to other tragedies. People exhaled. It would seem that this is the end. Evil has been caught, justice has been served. But evil is not people. Evil is the system, and the system is not dead. Just 3 days after the arrest, strange transfers began to arrive in the accounts of 2 other schools in a neighboring city. Small amounts at first, 500,000 rublei, from the parents' accounts to the school fund, to repairs, to excursions. Only the parents did not transfer anything. The accounting department noticed discrepancies, but did not attach any importance to them. There are glitches, they said. We'll figure it out later. The handwriting of the schemes was the same fake accounts, the same names, even the same addresses, only changed by 1 letter. And most importantly, it was no longer the teacher or the student who was behind all these operations, but others, new ones, those who had previously been in the shadows, those who did not end up in court. The group was bigger than it seemed, much bigger. Those who were arrested were just the performers, and the real puppeteers continued to operate. The network did not stop working. It simply rebuilt. And now the second wave has begun. The same methods, the same cold-bloodedness. Only now, the scale is wider. City after city, school after school. And I still watched, followed, listened, because I knew they did not disappear. They adapted. And the next school, it can be yours.